Ever wondered if you still have to pay rent if your landlord is selling the house? It's a question that has crossed the mind of many tenants. The uncertainty that comes with the sale of the property you call home can be stressful, and one of the biggest misconceptions out there is that if your landlord decides to sell, you're suddenly off the hook for rent. But is that really the case? Understanding the ins and outs of your rights as a tenant is crucial, especially in situations like these. It can help you navigate the complexities of the rental world and ensure that you're not left in the lurch. We're here to debunk myths, clear up confusion, and provide you with the knowledge you need to make informed decisions about your living situation. So let's dive into the legal aspects of this situation, shall we? First things first, let's talk about your rights as a tenant. You see, these rights are your safeguard, your protection in the world of leases and landlords, so it's crucial to understand them. To kick things off, one of the most essential rights you hold as a tenant is the right to occupy. This means you have the legal right to live in the property until your lease expires. Sounds simple enough, right? And it is, but here's the twist. This right remains in effect, regardless of whether the landlord decides to sell the property or not. Yes, you heard that right. Even if your landlord decides to sell, your lease agreement remains valid, and you can stay put until the end of your lease term. Now, this doesn't mean you'll suddenly find yourself living in a house owned by a stranger. The new owner, often referred to as the purchaser, steps into the shoes of your old landlord. They take on the rights and responsibilities of the previous owner, which includes respecting your lease agreement. Another key right you have as a tenant is the right to a habitable home. This means your landlord can't just neglect the property because they're planning to sell. They must continue to maintain the property and ensure it's safe and livable. If they fail to do so, you have the right to take legal action. And let's not forget about the right to privacy. Your landlord can't just barge in anytime they like or show the place to potential buyers without giving you notice. They must respect your privacy and provide reasonable notice before entering the premises. So in essence, as a tenant, you have a strong legal standing. You have the right to stay in your rented home until your lease term ends, enjoy a livable environment, and demand privacy, even when your landlord decides to sell. So what does this mean for you, the tenant, when your landlord decides to sell? Well, stay tuned and we'll delve into that next. Now, on to the crux of the matter. Do you still have to pay rent if your landlord is selling the house? The short answer is yes, you do. The sale of a house doesn't automatically terminate your lease agreement. If you've signed a lease for a specified period of time, then you are legally obligated to continue paying rent until the end of that period. This is because your lease agreement is a binding contract between you and the landlord, and it continues to be in effect even if the ownership of the property changes hands. Think of it this way. Your lease is like a ticket to a concert. If the venue changes ownership before the concert, it doesn't mean the concert is canceled or your ticket is void. You still get to enjoy the show, provided you've paid for your ticket. Similarly, as long as you're up to date with your rent, you have the right to remain in the property until your lease ends, regardless of who owns the house. Now, you might be wondering, what if the new owners want to move in right away? Well, in most cases, the new owners would have to honor your lease until it expires. They bought the property with the understanding that they were also taking on the existing lease agreements. However, there are exceptions. For instance, if your lease includes a clause that allows for termination in the event of a sale, then you could be required to move out earlier. But such clauses are not common, and they must be clearly stated in the lease agreement. Otherwise, the default rule is that your lease continues until its set end date. Another exception could be if you're on a month-to-month lease. In this case, the landlord or the new owners can typically end the lease with proper notice, usually 30 days. But again, this depends on the terms of your lease and the local laws where you live. But what happens if the house is sold before your lease ends? So the house has been sold. Now what? You may be wondering what happens next. Well, the process is actually more straightforward than you might think. Firstly, let's talk about the lease. the crucial document that outlines the terms of your tenancy. When a property is sold, your lease doesn't magically disappear. No, it remains in effect and it's transferred to the new owner. That means the conditions and terms you agreed on when you signed the lease still apply. You see, your lease is tied to the property, not the landlord. It's kind of like when you buy a pre-owned car. The warranty comes with the car, not the previous owner. Isn't that a relief? Now let's talk about rent. Yes, you still have to pay rent. The new landlord has acquired not just a house, but also a tenant who pays rent. That's you. You'll continue to pay rent just as you did before, albeit to a new person or entity. The new owner will provide you with information on how and where to send your rent payments. If they don't, make sure you ask. What about your security deposit? Well, that too is transferred to the new owner. If you've been a model tenant, there's no need to worry. Your security deposit is safe and will be returned to you minus any deductions for damage beyond normal wear and tear as stipulated in your lease. Remember though, the new owner is not a wild card. They can't just change the rules mid-game. They have to abide by the terms of the existing lease. So if your lease says no pets, the new owner can't suddenly allow pets. If your lease is for a year, the new owner can't suddenly make it month to month. So in essence, the sale of the house doesn't drastically change your living situation. You'll keep living there, paying rent, and abiding by the terms of your lease, just as before. But remember, the new owner has to respect the existing lease. Let's summarize what we've learned today. We've embarked on a journey through the intersection where rental agreements meet real estate transactions. We've navigated complex legal terrain, and it's time to round up our insights. Firstly, we delved into the legal rights of tenants. Remember, your rights as a tenant are protected by various state and federal laws. These laws dictate that your landlord cannot simply evict you because they've decided to sell the property. They must honor the lease agreement until its expiration. If you're on a month-to-month lease, your landlord is required to give you a notice period, typically 30 days, before asking you to vacate. We also discussed the importance of understanding your lease agreement. This document is your shield and your guide. It outlines the terms and conditions of your tenancy, including what happens if the property is sold. Reviewing it carefully can save you a lot of headaches down the line. Next, we tackled the question at the heart of today's discussion. Do I have to pay rent if my landlord is selling the house? The answer, in short, is yes. The sale of the property doesn't absolve you of your responsibility to pay rent. Until you're officially notified of a change in ownership and given different instructions, you should continue paying rent to your current landlord. We then moved on to the sale of the house. Here, we learned that the sale doesn't necessarily mean you'll need to pack your bags and find a new place to live. If the property is sold, your lease agreement is typically transferred to the new owner, who then steps into the shoes of your landlord. This means that they must respect the terms of your current lease until it ends. However, there are exceptions. If your lease has a clause that allows termination upon sale, you may be required to move out. Alternatively, the new owner may intend to use the property for personal use. In these cases, you should be given adequate notice and potentially relocation assistance, depending on your local laws. Lastly, remember that communication is key. If your landlord is planning to sell, it's in your best interest to have a frank conversation about what to expect. This can alleviate uncertainties and ensure that both parties are on the same page. In conclusion, the world of tenancy and property sales can be complicated, but with the right knowledge, it doesn't have to be intimidating. We've equipped you with the facts you need to navigate this situation with confidence. So the next time someone asks, "Do I still have to pay rent if my landlord is selling the house?" you'll know exactly what to say.